Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah Hallis, and I work as the Experiential Education Coordinator at SuccessWorks. We are really excited to have you all here today for Taste of Success International Affairs. We have three fantastic alumni who are with us to give their time to us today. So we are going to get started with each of the alumni giving introductions. And after that, we will be inviting you all to share any reflections, ask any questions that you have. We really want this to be a conversation this afternoon. So thanks again for joining us. And I'm going to kick it off by turning it over to our alumni. So whomever would like to go first, feel free.
I'm happy to go first if that works. Is everyone good with that? Awesome. Hi, everybody. My name is Hillary Miller. I'm calling to you from New York City. I'd like to brag that it's a bit warmer than Wisconsin or wherever anybody's calling in from, but I highly doubt it. We had a hopeful week last week. Now it's freezing again, needless to say. I shouldn't be complaining because I am originally from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and then I went to UW for 4 years in Madison, so I'm used to the cold weather. Any alternative is fine by me. I graduated from UW in May 2019, so only a year and a half, 2 years ago, but in pandemic years, it feels like it's been 2 decades. I studied political science, history, and Jewish studies while at UW, and was really I would say that my coursework heavily focused on World War II, Holocaust history, human rights studies, genocide history. I would say within that range, which ultimately led to my senior year when I applied for a series of jobs in the Jewish advocacy nonprofit space. I should also mention that while I was a student at UW, I did a series of internships in the summers. One summer I was in Chicago interning for the Israeli consulate to the Midwest. The following summer I was interning at the American Jewish Committee, the Chicago regional office, and then had also done a satellite internship my senior year at the Brandeis Center for Human Rights Under Law, which is DC based, but I was writing for them and doing some work from UW. And then also on campus, I was heavily involved with academic publishing. So I was the editor-in-chief of Archive, which is UW's history journal. I was also an executive editor of the political science journal, Sifting and Winnowing. And I also was the founder and head editor of a Jewish studies academic journal called Avuka. So I had always enjoyed engaging with others, undergraduate student work. I love that intellectual exchange, especially when it comes to the issues I was particularly focused on in my studies. And I would say that foreign policy, human rights, international affairs, and Jewish diaspora relations, again, were pretty focal point to my, or definitional, I should say, to my academic experience at UW. And my senior year came along and I was looking for jobs to apply to. I would say as a caveat, this might be useful for some students who are debating whether or not to go straight through to grad school or to take some time off. I was contemplating whether or not I wanted to go straight through to law school. I thought it was my destiny. I was a political science major. My parents were political science majors and they went straight through to law school. But fortunately, a wonderful professor of mine, Professor Bitzon, in the history department, forwarded a job opportunity. It was a 1-year fellowship in Geneva, Switzerland. There was no way I thought that I could ever get it, but I decided to apply, and it was with an organization called United Nations Watch. UN Watch is a Geneva-based human rights advocacy group. It is a UN accountability organization. So what does that mean exactly? We hold the United Nations to account based on the principles enshrined in its own charter. So we assume that the UN, founded in the aftermath of World War II, is an institution that is indeed promoting and protecting human rights. However, it is a politicized institution, and in that sense, sometimes the UN is not indeed holding itself to its own standards. So as an independent rights organization, we're holding it to account. And my professor had forwarded me this opportunity to move to Switzerland after graduating from UW to do a 1-year contracted fellowship with them. I ultimately got the position, moved to Switzerland in September 2019, which again feels like 100 years ago, and was there all of last year, working at an office just across the street from the Palais des Nations, which is the UN headquarters in Geneva. That's where the UN Human Rights Council is based. That's where the World Health Organization is based, the International Labor Organization, and a whole group of UN bodies. So it was a really incredible year filled with writing press releases, briefings, monitoring the UN. I had an opportunity to speak at the United Nations on multiple occasions, delivering testimony on human rights abuses in Equatorial Guinea, in Russia, and in China. So I learned a lot. And ultimately, when my year came to a close, I was hired to continue with UN Watch, but in New York. So I'm currently working for UN Watch as our New York associate. As I said before, the UN in Geneva has a whole group of various organizations, as it does here in New York. So we have the Secretariat, the Security Council, the General Assembly, and a whole consortium of other groups. So I'm here as our diplomatic affairs coordinator, monitoring the UN here. So is that roughly a good introduction? Is there anything else I needed to mention?
Hillary, I think that's fantastic, and really appreciate you sharing all of that. And I'm certain students who are on the call here will have questions. So thank you so much. Really fascinating to hear how that connection with the professor yielded an amazing opportunity. Of course, all the incredible work you did as an undergrad really, helped that as well. So we're going to go on to Tony next. Tony, if you would like to share your introduction, we'd appreciate it.
Thanks so much. I'm on the other end of the spectrum. I graduated from the Center for Development in
Tony, it looks like you're having...
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
We were having some connection issues, but we can hear you now. So if you don't mind starting over, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, and I've stopped my video because of the connection issues. So I graduated in 1973. Basically tried to teach us public policy as it pertained to international work. So most of the students, can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you now. We're just muted for purposes of sound clarity.
Okay, great. So the classes were primarily students from other countries who were mid-level career administrators. And then there were a few Americans, myself included. I had been in the Peace Corps in the 60s, and that's how I ended up at the Center for Development, because that piqued my interest. In high school, I had studied a number of languages, so I have a classical background, and I was good in languages. In the Peace Corps, I learned Arabic and French fluently, both. So I thought that I would end up doing something with the State Department. or foreign service in general. And when I graduated, I was offered two foreign service jobs. One was deputy director of Peace Corps in Tunisia. The other was a career assignment with USAID, also in Tunisia, as it turned out. And the third job I was offered was a think tank for the governor of Wisconsin. There were a few people that were advisors to the governor. But because I think for me, the most important thing was knowing myself. So my driver was international. And originally I thought it was government. As it turned out, it didn't turn out to be government. After I came back from Tunisia, after 3.5 years, I joined Chase Manhattan Bank, which was a total career switch. Anybody who knew me would, including my wife at that time, didn't believe that I was going to work for Chase Manhattan Bank. It wasn't really who I was, so I thought, so other people thought. And I spent 20 years there on the international lending side, treasury, and risk management. Incredible career, lived in London, New York, and South Africa. But the thing that really had me interested was finance that made an impact. So after I left Chase, I joined Development Alternatives Incorporated, which is a Bethesda consulting company, as a principal, and ended up doing bank restructurings in East and Central Africa, both at DAI and then at Finca Impact. So I went from multi-million-dollar deals, literally huge deals, Fortune 500 companies, mainline kind of business, to dealing with some of the poorest people on the planet because we offered microfinance products, both payment, deposit, and lending. And so, for me, it was the path, the international, and it was secondly, trying to do something that was useful. Part of my career at Chase, we did do some very useful things, but clearly that's a business where you're out, about making money. And in the latter part of my career, which was several years, brought me to East and Central Africa, where I actually lived. So when I added up, I had done business in something like 65 countries, Europe, Asia, Africa, and Central and Latin America. I got what I wanted, thanks to University of Wisconsin.
Thank you so much, Tony. What a fascinating story. And I'm glad to see that your connection is a little bit better now.
Great.
We look forward to questions that students have for Tony as well. And last but certainly not least, we are going to move on to Laura. And we're looking forward to hearing your story as well, Laura. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Sarah. Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be a part of the conversation. Hillary and Tony, it's great to hear your stories as well. You've mentioned two of my most favorite countries, Israel and South Africa. Definitely, I love visiting both countries. I have very fond memories of both. My name is Laura Klinke. I graduated in '94, so in the middle between Tony and Hillary. I got my degree in international relations with a certificate or an emphasis in Southeast Asian studies. While at school, I took Japanese language courses. I never became fluent, but I could hold my own. I took Japanese because back in the 90s, it might be hard to believe this, but the world thought that Japan was going to take over the world because of its economic prowess that it had at that time. So I thought, you know what, if I better learn the language and the culture if I want to be able to be in business. So that's why my main impetus of taking Japanese at that time, and it really has defined me, my personal life and my professional career. My career path really started by really identifying a passion that I had, and I actually did find Japanese and Japan as a passion, not only because of a career interest, but as a kindergarten, my next door neighbor was from Japan, and I always was fascinated going to the house and looking at the pictures and the artwork on their walls and wanting to learn more about that culture. So that's really what began my career journey. I also studied in Japan and did a study abroad for 2 years. I had the luxury of being over there for a consistent period of time. And when I returned back to UW-Madison and after I graduated, I was lucky enough to be in the right spot at the right time and got offered a job to work in Japan for 2 years. So in total, I lived and worked in Japan as a student and as part of the kickoff to my career for a total of 4 years. And again, really defined me and really helped me solidify, like Tony, that what I really wanted to pursue in my career is not really the industry sector, but really have an international component to it. So upon returning back to the United States, I always stayed in contact with my bosses that I had when I was an intern, and lucky, and again, luck was on my side again. And when I returned back to the United States, a position was opened for me, and I became an East Asian consultant for the Wisconsin Department of Agriculture, which might seem kind of surprising to you, but our state of Wisconsin is a huge agricultural exporter. We have many Wisconsin companies who are exporting overseas, Asia being one of the key markets. So I really flourished and grew in my career at the Wisconsin Department of Agriculture and became a supervisor and a manager. And then after about 15 years working with Department of Agriculture, working with companies, which I absolutely loved. I don't think I could stay in state government for my whole career, but I really love the aspect of working with companies and the different products they offered and helping them troubleshoot really challenging trade policy and trade barrier issues, helping them design and produce a product that was applicable to many countries around the world without having the risk of it. So I guess that was a fun part. So afterwards, I was able, and I took a job heading up the state's economic development organization and ended up heading up the state's international strategy. And I was in that position for about 3 years, 2 to 3 years. Loved it. Very stressful. I'm sure Tony, being in politics, in the politics side, can imagine that, in my role, that anytime the governor stepped outside the United States, I was responsible for coordinating the team and the movements, the security, the meetings, the briefings. Anything that went wrong was my fault, and anything went right, of course, was someone else's glory. So it was a great learning opportunity for me. Loved it, but I really was looking for something different. Living in Madison, I knew that there were a lot of dynamic companies that were exporting and in the international field, but I knew I didn't want to be in international sales. My whole life, I've never had a 9-to-5 job. I've never sat behind a desk 365 days out of the year. I've always had a job that required me to work late evenings to communicate with someone across the world. Or getting up very early in the morning. Typically, I'm in a different country every month. So that's what I loved. I raised a family in that type of career. So women out there that might be a little bit reluctant to say I can't have a job in international, that's false. You can have a job, you can travel, you can raise a family. And I got introduced again through contacts and pursued a job working for the Wisconsin Foundation Alumni Association, where I am now. And I feel I have the best job on campus. I have a job where I oversee our international alumni relations, and in my role, I travel the world and I meet with really prominent alumni who are making global impacts to new discoveries in politics and business and the arts. And I learn about their story, I learn about their journey, I share it with students, and I work with those alumni to help them connect back to the university, whether it's giving a donation or giving their time or giving their interests, to be mentors to students. And I learn about all the fascinating things that they enjoyed about UW-Madison. So again, best job on campus. The one common thing I have found with all the alumni I have met around the world, it's every single person I've met, the one thing that they've always said that they want to do and that they like to do is to mentor students. And they like when students reach out to them. They like to help. They like to answer questions. So for those of you that maybe are a little bit uncomfortable about reaching out to someone blindly and not knowing somebody, and how do you reach out, and can I ask for an informational interview? Yes, you can. Reach out, ask. The one thing I would recommend is that when you do is be prepared. Do your research, do your homework on the person or the industry sector that they're in or the company, and make sure you come prepared with some really powerful, thoughtful questions. And then at the end is make sure you say thank you and stay in contact with those that you connect with. And look forward to your questions.
Thank you so much. Some excellent wisdom there, and from all of you. So we really appreciate that. Students, as you are thinking of questions, I'm going to get us started with a question here. So for all three of you, your three different career paths demonstrate the range and variety of ways that international affairs can weave into different professional areas. Can you talk about how students can combine their international interests with other professional goals and skills?
I can start, because that was the big question for me, which is that you go to school, you do well, but you're very aware you know nothing. And so you have objectives, but you don't know how to do them. And the first thing you have to know is that most of what you learn is on the job. So the hardest part is getting the job. The rest of it is you're smart enough to learn, and you just have to be very rigorous about, the discipline you need to keep going. In my case, the choice of joining Chase was key to me in terms of my personal development, my career development, but most importantly, the professional development, because Chase had a 15-month killer training course. Very few people actually survived it over the 15 months, but I learned finance. So it was like an MBA program times 5, the way they ran it. And that gave me the foundation skills I needed to actually work in the field that I wanted to work in, and to be able to do stuff. As I said, the most important thing was doing, learning by doing. So the biggest hurdle is get that first job, use that first job, but make sure that it's kind of in line with what you want to do in your life. You don't know what you want to do, but you know what you don't want to do. That's really important. First thing, know what you don't want to do. And the second thing is be open to different career paths to get there.
I can completely second that, because I feel like, as somebody who's just started in my professional career, the last year and a half has been so valuable in collecting feedback and data and information about the field of what it means to be working in the human rights, NGO, UN, international institution space, all of which I really didn't know other than textbook knowledge of the UN structure. And even then, it's so reduced and simplified to a textbook, you can't really understand it unless you're immersed in the context with your work. So I completely agree with you, Tony, and would say that I loved school, and I still do. I'm yearning to get back to grad school at some point, just because I really do have a thirst for academia, and I could be on JSTOR all afternoon looking at academic papers. That's just who I am. But the last year and a half has been so indispensable, just again in what it means to learn a workplace culture. Every single organization has its own culture in terms of how you communicate, how you email. For example, my colleagues in Switzerland are 6 hours away. My colleagues in Tel Aviv are 7 hours away. What does that mean in terms of my work and my timeliness? And also, in the way when I reach out to media and journalists at the UN and various diplomatic missions here. It's just you can't learn these types of things in the classroom as much as I'd like to believe so. It's so important to be out in the field. And even if you're not sure exactly what it is you want to do right when you get out of school, regardless, each experience is valuable because you're going down this tunnel that's narrowing you towards what you want to do eventually. For example, I kind of was got out of school a year and a half ago and was flung into this broad scope of international human rights and love it, really passionate about it, and so glad that I've gotten that exposure. But over the course of the last 2 years, I've realized, okay, so if I want to go back to grad school, I know specifically I want to focus on these types of topics. I know specifically I'm interested in this, not necessarily the UN General Assembly, but the UN Human Rights Council and things going on there. So each experience right out of school is so valuable. And also I would say that just because I'm very self-aware that I'm in this position now and I'm wholly committed to UN Watch, but at the same time, it's such a unique networking opportunity for any human rights activists I'm meeting from a comparable NGO or organization. I 100% would reach out to them to ask them about their work. Same as I would with, for example, the UN Special Rapporteur on Religious Freedom. I was able to interact with him and have had a few calls about the type of work that he's doing. So that's a more UN approach, or he's within the UN system and understanding how the UN is approaching certain topics as opposed to how we are as an outside NGO. All that goes to the point that definitely leverage the position that you're in to engage with your contacts and also do a lot of deep introspection about where you're at now and how you can more specifically target your career goals moving forward.
Great.
Thank you so much for that. Laura, we definitely want to hear from you, and students, we also want you to be thinking about questions that you might have that you want to ask after this. So go ahead, Laura.
Sure. I just want to echo both what Hillary and Tony had said. Most of what you learn is going to be on the job. And as Tony said, you need to get the job first. What I always recommend to students now is that the courses that you pick are very important. And I think if you have if you're pursuing an international relations or international related job, you may want to look at picking some courses that maybe have some hard skills attached to it. One, not only to add to your resume, but also to see if you like it and see if you're interested in it. But most importantly, look for opportunities on campus where you can demonstrate that you can apply what you learned in the classroom to real life. And I think, Hillary, you had a laundry list of things that you did while as a student on campus, which were great examples. And I think that there is no excuse not to find those opportunities. They are all over. The hardest part is trying to whittle them down. But there are international internship opportunities. You could work for an organization. You could do some volunteer work. Again, demonstrating applying what you're learning in the classroom to real life is going to be really critical for when you first start your career, and really is going to give you a leg up when you're trying to get that first job. I've hired many people in my career. I've hired a lot of entry-level positions as well, and I always look for, even though they've never had any job experience, I look for what they've done in school with organizations, summer jobs. I think that's really critical. And I always say that you can always learn the industry, you can always learn a product, but it's really hard to teach someone to have an international mind and have an international mindset. So if you can come to the table with that and demonstrate that how you've applied your international mindset, I think an employer is going to know that they can always teach you what their product or service or thing is.
If I could just add a piece, I'm actually a mentor at the Keller Center for Entrepreneurship at Princeton. I live in the town next to Princeton, and what that does is it actually provides the opportunity for students to create businesses. A lot of the kids are engineering students. but there's a lot of, liberal arts students who are interested. And we actually get to the point of creating a business. It's not just thinking about it, it's actually putting together. So that is just so incredibly valuable as an experience, no matter what you do with your life in school. And the other piece of it that I wanted to share is my high school in Boston actually has just created a center for innovation. We're talking about, getting kids who are 12 years old already thinking about innovation and their sort of what do they want to do to create stuff. And I know University of Wisconsin just has so much to offer in terms of resources that the students really should take advantage of that.
All right, thank you for all of those wonderful insights. Students, what questions do you have? We want to make sure that we get your questions answered. You can